Hi, everyone. Thank you for those of you who will be joining me today. I'm going to give this a little bit of time to allow some people to come on. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can follow me at facebook.com/Peggy Oliveira, where I do these videos from time to time. So today, if you're watching, I see somebody's watching. If you want to let me know who you are or where you're coming from, I'd like to just acknowledge that you're here. I probably won't be using names as I might be sharing this in some other places as well, but I would love to be able to say hi, hello. I do want you to share any questions or thoughts that you have, but I wanted to just come in and do this video. It's something I've talked about, I think, a little bit before in different ways, but I wanted to just kind of have a little bit more, share a little bit more information, talk a little bit more about affirmations and what they are and how they help and how sometimes they can create some more difficulty. Hello, welcome. So if you have questions, feel free to share, but I am going to just kind of share a little bit about kind of the idea of affirmations from my perspective and some of my thoughts about it. So for many people, particularly in the self-help realm, in the mental health realm, affirmations are definitely suggested quite often, but particularly in the self-help realm, there's a lot of discussion around using affirmations. And over the years, I've actually tried in my own process. I had tried using affirmations, and then in hearing and talking with other people and hearing their experiences about using affirmations and kind of what it left them with, I just really started seeing that there is this pattern for a lot of people, and not just survivors of abuse. This can be true for anybody, really. So the idea of affirmations, when you say a positive statement to yourself over and over again, one exercise that is used quite often to kind of help build self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem is actually looking in a mirror at yourself and saying a positive statement like, I am deserving, I am worthy, I am lovable, I am beautiful, that kind of thing. But they're also used just kind of like to write over and over again, or to put Post-its here and there with positive statements about what you want to believe about yourself. So it could be anything from, I am smart, I am capable, I am worthy, I am talented, whatever it might be, to even things that you want to kind of create or manifest in your life, to bring forth in your life. I am abundant. I am successful. I am an Olympic athlete. I am whatever. Like, just really kind of putting that statement out there, just repeating to yourself over and over again, I am whatever it is that you're trying to bring forth for yourself. And the idea of it is good because we're so caught up in our own thoughts. Much of the time, we're not even aware of the fact that it's happening, or certainly what those exact thoughts are. So if you're saying to yourself, I am worthy, there is some positive to that, for sure. And if you repeat it to yourself over and over again, the idea is that you begin to believe it, right? And if you think about how I talk about the impact of abuse, that it comes from the meaning that we attach to it, it comes from the things that we say to ourselves over and over again about how it's our fault, that we're being punished, that we're bad, that this person couldn't love me, or, whatever it is. And we develop those beliefs because we say those things to ourselves over and over again. So it makes sense that if you say to yourself over and over again, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy, that eventually you would believe that you're worthy. So that's kind of the idea of affirmations. What I have personally experienced and experienced in my work over the years is that there's kind of a bit of a caveat, maybe even a flaw to this idea. And that is that when you believe at your core something, and let's face it, for most of us, what we believe at our core about ourselves is not usually a positive thing. When you believe something at your core, for example, undeserving or unworthy or ugly or fat or not creative or whatever it might be, and then you say to yourself, especially if you're looking at yourself in the mirror, the very person that you don't like, but then you say to yourself, I am worthy. For many people, especially if you're unaware of how ingrained that idea of unworthiness is, or where that comes from, what those things are that you say to yourself about being unworthy, when you say to yourself, I am worthy, automatically, much of the time you're not even going to be aware, but the core belief of being unworthy comes up. It shoots up immediately because you are doing something that goes against what your core belief is. And that core belief, in many ways, is meant to protect you. So it acts a bit like a survival mechanism. So when you say to yourself, I am worthy, that idea of not being worthy, that belief of not being worthy will stop it. And not only does it kind of stop it from being allowed to integrate, but very often we'll actually say something to ourselves, even if we're not aware that it's happening, we'll say something to ourselves to completely contradict the idea that we're worthy. So for example, if you don't believe that you're worthy and you say to yourself, you look at yourself in the mirror, or you're just saying to yourself, or you're writing out, I am worthy, even if you're not consciously aware, so even if you're not aware that this thought is happening, if at your core you believe you're unworthy, when you say, I am worthy, that core belief kicks in, and not only does it say you're not worthy, but it reminds you of all the reasons that you're not, or at least that you believe that you're not. It reminds you of the things that you've said to yourself over the years as to why you're not worthy, because bad things happen to you, because you made a mistake, because you let somebody down, because you didn't get straight A's. There's any number of things that you hold on to as so-called proof that you're unworthy. So when you say to yourself, I am worthy, if that's all that you're really doing, those core messages are going to keep the idea of being worthy far from being integrated. And they remind you then of all the reasons why you think that you're not. If you say to yourself, if you look in the mirror and say, I am beautiful as I am, and I know that's actually a suggestion that I've said to people. If you look in the mirror and say, I am beautiful as I am, but you've held on to this belief that you're not, that you're ugly, that you pick out a characteristic about the way that you look and you hyper-focus on that as being not good enough. When you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I am beautiful as I am, or I am beautiful, it's not going to register because you find 101 reasons why you're not, or at least why you think you're not. All those things that you've held on to, maybe things you've heard from somebody else. Maybe your skin isn't perfect. Maybe you're having a bad hair day. I have those all the time. Maybe somebody told you to smile more, and you don't feel comfortable smiling. There's so many different things that can come up just like that to kind of disprove in your mind that you're not beautiful. If you say to yourself, I am capable, what your subconscious is going to do is focus on all the times that you didn't complete something you wanted to complete, all the times that you made a mistake, all the times that you didn't get an A. So affirmations are good when used really intentionally and mindfully at the same time that we're recognizing that it's probably going to be triggering some core beliefs. Hi, everybody. Big problem for me with affirmations. I hate when my counselor wants me to do this. Yes, I am going to give you some things to think about. And this is a really big thing that a lot of therapists and certainly coaches and friends will even say to you, to use affirmations. There's books written about it, about the power of affirmations. And what made me decide to do this today is I don't remember exactly what I was watching or listening to or reading. I don't know exactly what it was, but this morning, first thing, whatever it was, it said, whenever you say to yourself, or whatever follows I am, when you're thinking or saying something to yourself, is what is true. And the idea was, instead of saying, I am an idiot, you say to yourself, I am successful, I am worthy, I am a star, I am whatever, and that's what's going to happen. And I sat there thinking about it, and I thought, it's a nice idea. And I suppose there might be some people that it actually works for. Just very simply, that works. I've not known any of them. Even people that don't have abuse histories, I've not known any of them. For the very reasons that I said. Because when we struggle with something over and over again, it's because there's some belief at our core. And much of the time, we don't even know what that belief is, that becomes like instinct. So we continue on a level to fight these affirmations. And not only do we fight the affirmations, but it kind of reminds us often of why those things that we're trying to say to ourselves just can't be true. I remember myself doing, I don't remember specific affirmations necessarily, but I remember trying it. I remember just doing different things. One was I definitely tried the mirror thing. I did other things, and it just not only wasn't working, but it made me feel worse. And then hearing that from other people too, because of course I thought, well, maybe that's just me. It works for everybody else. It just really proves that there's something inherently wrong with me because they're not working. So I felt worse. And in hearing from other people, like the person who shared about the counselor suggesting it, I really thought, I hated it. And I never suggested to anybody that they just, that they try affirmations without talking about the bigger issue and kind of the bigger exercise around using affirmations. So here's how to use affirmations. At least, obviously, this is from my perspective. And what I have found to be helpful for me and for those that I work with. So, deserving is a big affirmation that I think can have a lot of benefit in using. So, if you believe that you're undeserving, and that can look a lot of different ways. You might actually recognize that you say to yourself, I don't deserve that for something good. Or that when something bad happens, I deserve that. So you may be very aware that you have those kinds of thoughts. For many people, that's not really, you don't recognize that. But it shows up in other ways. For example, maybe if there's something you really want to do, you won't tell somebody that you want to do it, or you won't go after it because you don't think you deserve it. And you'll just tell yourself that you're lazy or that you don't really want it. But inside, you tell that to yourself just so that you don't feel disappointed. It can show up in having a difficult time saying thank you when somebody pays you a compliment or gives you a gift. Now, I know there's a lot of you that can relate to that. That was a huge one for me. And again, it happens. Maybe you're consciously aware of it. Maybe you're saying to yourself, I don't deserve it. But for many people, that's not what you notice thinking. You just notice that you don't feel very good about it. So it can show up in a lot of ways. So what do you do instead? Hey, I have been doing a course where we have been told we think over 2,000 thoughts a day on average. So we have to keep repeating the affirmations hundreds of times until we change our conscious minds, our conditioning, as we need to rewrite our conditioning or thoughts. And I agree with that, except we also have to do the work to undo it. Just repeating something to yourself over and over and over again doesn't get at, it's almost like pulling the weeds. Like to really you have to go under it. You have to get to the root of the weed. Otherwise, it's just going to keep coming back. And it is very much the same thing. We have to do the work of excavating the what that core belief is. When we just keep repeating something to ourselves over and over again, especially if we're not conscious of it happening, that core belief is always right under there. It's always keeping those positive thoughts or affirmations from really getting in. So when you're repeating a positive thought or affirmation to yourself, for example, deserving, I am deserving, being able to find a reason that you can hold on to, even if you don't fully believe it, that you are deserving. If you are saying to yourself, I am capable, but at your core you feel like you screw everything up. When you say to yourself, I am capable, you have to go back and remind yourself of some very specific examples that show that you are capable. So for example, you might go back and look at something you've accomplished. It doesn't have to be something big, it can be something small. You may not see it, you may not define it as an accomplishment, but there's tons of things that you've accomplished. I can guarantee that. So going back and looking at the things. So for me, one of the things that, going to school, I quit high school when I was 16 years old, and I really didn't believe that I was smart enough to complete high school. Certainly didn't think I was smart enough to go to college. And the idea that I was incapable of completing college was a huge thing for me. So even into my master's degree, I kind of played off getting my bachelor's degree as well. I got lucky or whatever. I came up with it at that moment. And then even in my master's program, I would make excuses as to why I didn't really deserve the A or whatever it might be. But I would start to look at, if I wanted to believe that I was capable of being successful in my career or having my private practice or whatever it was, I had to go back and look at, well, I did finish my degree. Even though I didn't fully like feel proud of that. I didn't completely own what it took to get there because I thought, well, I just got lucky. The reality is that there's a lot of things in our lives that we accomplish, that we complete, that we create, that we don't allow ourselves to fully internalize. So I would use the fact that I got through school as something that showed that I was capable, that I was smarter maybe than I believed that I was. So again, I didn't necessarily believe it wholeheartedly, but I thought, well, I guess there has to be some truth to it, even if I don't believe it. So we have to say this statement, I am capable, and then find something. And there's lots of things. There's lots of things that you can point to. Maybe even ask somebody, so that you can say to yourself, I am capable because I got through school. I am capable because I got this promotion. I am capable because I got this job. I am capable because I've raised well-mannered children. I am capable because, and there's so many things that you are capable of. For like a talent, what are things that people have said to you? There's so many different ways that we can come up with, so many things that we can identify that help us see the truth of who we are. Because when you say to yourself, I am capable, and then all those other things come up that tell you that you're not, or I am worthy, but all those other things come up that tell you that you're not, it gets stuck. It doesn't really get any further than that. On some level, you might buy into it a little bit and think, yes, this is helping, this is helping, this is helping. It's kind of the placebo effect. And eventually, those core beliefs are going to come right back. They're going to end up dictating how you show up. So taking the time when you're doing affirmations and find real life examples for yourself that show that to be true. Because there are many. Worthiness is a big one, and this one is kind of hard for people to really find something that they can feel is proof of being worthy. So for this one, maybe there is something very specific. Some people would say, I'm here, therefore I'm worthy. That doesn't work for a lot of people. But maybe you've done something that you feel really good about, and maybe that helps you feel worthy. So maybe there's something like that that you can point to. But I know for a lot of you, there's some things, or it's hard to find something that you can point to that helps you really believe in your worthiness. So one thing that you can do when you're working on an affirmation of worthiness, instead of saying, I am worthy because I exist, or I am worthy because I'm a good person, I'm worthy because I make a contribution to the world, or whatever. One thing that you can do is, I am worthy because my abuse does not dictate my worthiness. I am worthy because those people who did not stand up for me do not dictate my worthiness. I am worthy because all those hurtful things that were said to me do not dictate my worthiness. And they don't. They absolutely do not. So even when you cannot find something that feels like it could make sense to say in those moments, that just really kind of feel like physically don't feel like they're in alignment, being able to say that, because that does not dictate that, because that does not mean that. I am capable because quitting high school does not mean that I'm not smart. That's my example. So without even having to get my degree or anything, I could say that. Because just because I quit high school doesn't mean that I'm not smart. There's many people who haven't completed high school who are brilliant. There's many people who do not look like the picture perfect success story, whatever the heck that might mean. Doesn't mean you're not worthy. Doesn't mean you're not strong. Doesn't mean you're not smart. Doesn't mean you're not courageous. So finding things that you can connect to that feel like they at least could be real, or that other people might point to that about you, in a way that shift what we really believe about ourselves. That's how we change, we chip away at those core beliefs. It's a part of reality testing. And I love the idea of writing an affirmation on a Post-it and putting it somewhere. I think that can be a great thing to do. Every time you look at it, you remind yourself why it's true. You remind yourself of all the reasons that that affirmation is true. Because I've done this work long enough to know, I've worked with enough people, I've known enough people in my personal life, even without having a history of abuse, because we are all wounded, that just repeating something to yourself over and over again does not actually shift, does not replace what you believe at your core. We have to do the other work. And I wanted to do this video in part 2 because I know that when, and I kind of talked about this or briefly mentioned it in the beginning, but I know that when we hear about how powerful something is for healing, how beneficial it is to millions of people all over the world and how it's changed their lives, and then you try it and you don't have the same success, how that can leave you feeling, how it reinforces the idea that there's just something really wrong with you, that it's not working for you, but it works for everybody else. That's not the case. So, use the affirmations, but play them out. Don't just stop with that single statement. Remind yourself of all the reasons why that statement is true or why it could be true. So, if people in your life are going against what you are trying to rewire, how do you get around that? Well, that's a great question. And there's 2 parts, and I hope I remember both parts. One is, if there are people in your life who tell you something different, one thing is maybe don't spend as much time around those people. And I'm not just kind of, I actually mean that very seriously. If that's possible, to not spend so much time with those people. But also the second part is kind of what I said a little bit ago about reminding yourself that those people in your life who always have something negative to say, and I've known some of those people too, or those people who don't want you to change, who don't want you to gain confidence, they're going to say things to you that contradict or that keep you stuck in some of those beliefs. Reminding yourself that these people have a desire, maybe an unconscious desire, but they have a desire for you to not change. The people closest to us in our lives, particularly if they're unhealthy, have difficulty as we change, particularly if that means that we're setting boundaries. So those people are going to say things to keep you from growing, from healing. So reminding yourself that that's what's going on, that just because they're saying something, it doesn't make it true. And so that idea that I was saying, I am worthy because this person doing this does not dictate my worthiness. So you could say the same thing, my whatever is true because this person saying this does not dictate this truth, whatever that truth is. It's hard because when you keep hearing those messages over and over again, especially from somebody who should be supporting you, who should be your biggest cheerleader, that's really hard. It's hard not to take that deeply personally. But you have to remind yourself that anybody who is supposed to care about you or support you, who says things that are not helpful over and over again, that's about them. So trying to remind yourself of that is important. Also, connecting with people who are your supporters, whether it's a friend or a therapist or a partner or your dog, somebody who smiles when they see you, somebody who looks forward to seeing you, somebody who encourages you. Think about what those people are saying to you. And it is hard. I'm not going to suggest that it's not. It just means that we need to work even harder at it. But it can happen. It really can happen, but it's twofold. It's one, recognizing that these people over here who keep saying negative things, that it's about them, that it's really about them, and making sure that you're connecting with or hearing from people who really do support you and want to see you feel good about who you are because they see the good in you. So I hope that answers or helps answer that question. If anybody else has questions, please feel free to ask. I will stay on for a little bit longer, so I want to be able to answer your questions if you have any. I'd also love to see who else may be here. So I'd also like to hear how many of you have tried using affirmations. Have they been successful, or have you found yourself struggling with them? Are you aware that when you say a positive affirmation, are you aware of those contradictory thoughts that come up immediately or not? Because sometimes we are. Sometimes we can be very aware of what that thought is. Good. I'm glad that it was helpful. And it's when we're aware that those thoughts come up, when we're consciously aware that there's something that comes up that contradicts that, it can be helpful to recognize that it's actually good that we're aware of that, because then we can do the work a little bit easier of doing some reality testing around that. Where it can be more problematic is when we're not really aware that that's what's happening. In fact, you're maybe working really hard, you're writing 100 times, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy. But every time you write that on a subconscious level, that belief of being unworthy is fighting back, fighting back, fighting back, and it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So it can end up having an even deeper impact. It can leave you feeling even worse because you don't know what's going on. You're not aware that you're coming up with all the reasons why you believe that you're unworthy. So bringing it into our consciousness is a really, really important first step in being able to recognize why something isn't maybe working the way that we think that it should. And the same thing is true for like self-help books or blogs or even some therapists and coaches, you know, why certain things that are supposed to work or be helpful don't end up being very helpful. And I did a video on YouTube about when self-help doesn't work. So if you haven't watched that and that's something you've struggled with a little bit, take a look at that. I find it difficult going into a different position as I don't know which of it is really me. What I believe to be true or another version of reality where I'm uncomfortable, where there isn't negativity, then I fall back to the old reality. It's similar to an addiction. Yeah, I'm not sure that I entirely understand this first person. Let me just read this again, sorry. Yeah. It does feel really uncomfortable. When you first start doing affirmations, whether you're aware of how they work or that there's these core beliefs coming up or whatever, when you first start doing affirmations, when you don't believe them, it feels uncomfortable. And part of the reason that it feels so uncomfortable, in addition to just being kind of a new idea, and change is difficult for a lot of people, is that that core belief kicks in. That part of you that is afraid of change, doesn't want you to take too big of a risk, doesn't want you to be hurt or disappointed, kicks in and tells you to pull back. And that uncomfortable feeling is designed for you to pull back. So when that comes up, it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute. Instead of going towards it, you tend to pull back. So it does feel really uncomfortable, and people can find they can find themselves feeling really irritated and angry sometimes because of that uncomfortableness that comes up. And that idea of it feeling kind of like an addiction is part of that, because it is a physiological response. It is very much a physiological response, and we react to a physiological response. When we're thinking, we can kind of talk ourselves through it. When our body reacts, very much like fight, flight, or freeze, when our body reacts, things just happen. We don't have nearly as much ability to control it. We can do things, but that's a whole other topic. But it's a very kind of complicated process that we go through, and it can be very difficult. And it's very similar to, for those of you that struggle with receiving compliments, and I know there's a ton of you out there, it's kind of the same thing, because instead of you saying it to yourself, you're hearing somebody else say it, which can feel even more uncomfortable. But it's kind of like they're saying an affirmation to you, and then that uncomfortable feeling is a similar kind of reaction. Yeah, so again, this is my thought. The idea that if you could just keep saying it enough, even though initially those doubts come up or whatever, eventually you'll believe it. From experience, that's just not the way it works. Based on my experience, based on the people that I know in my life, both personally and professionally, it just isn't that simple. Without doing that other piece of work, we have to find the reasons that we can, even if we don't fully believe it, just the things that, okay, well, it makes sense that would be true. If I was thinking about that for somebody else, then I would say that that's true. So finding things that we can think, well, maybe that could be true, even if we don't fully believe it, is an important, necessary step into getting to a place where we fully believe it at our core. Because we can say things, repeat things to ourselves over and over again, and kind of create this false sense of, or this false felt sense that it's true. We can talk ourselves into all kinds of things. How many of you have talked yourself into believing that your abuse wasn't that bad? Right? Yeah. How many of you have talked yourself into believing that the person who hurt you, in whatever way they did it, didn't really mean to? So the power of our thoughts really can have an effect. We can believe that we believe what it is that we're saying to ourselves. But it doesn't make it true. It's not what we believe necessarily at our core. So just saying something to ourselves over and over and over and over again doesn't change it if you do not do the work of changing the core belief. And one of the really powerful ways of being able to do that is through the use of affirmations, is saying an affirmation and then finding proof. That's reality testing. That's a form of reality testing. It's part of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is incredibly effective. So using it in that way is important and incredibly helpful. I do that all the time in my work. I don't necessarily refer to it as affirmations, but that's a big part of what I do in my work. New position, meaning positive people around you. So having positive people is difficult. I think that maybe is what you're saying. It can be difficult because it upsets kind of the status quo. Like the homeostasis. No matter what that homeostasis is, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, that's what feels right to us. And if we're in a place of difficulty or negativity, or the people around us are in a place of difficulty or negativity, when we start venturing out and being in a different space, so to speak, it does feel uncomfortable. Because again, our survival mechanism that we developed very early on knows how to handle what we're used to. It doesn't know how to handle something that's new, even when that new thing is absolutely beautiful and what we've always dreamed of. Our bodies and our minds don't know how to respond to that. It's part of the reason that people stay in abusive relationships as adults. Even though obviously that's not what anybody really wants, it's certainly not what they deserve. But because you learn the cycle, you learn the patterns, it feels better on some level than going out and experiencing something totally different. This is a great point, and I'm not mentioning people's names because I'm going to be sharing this video on YouTube as well. And I realize this is a public thing, but I just thought people might prefer if I didn't mention names. So this is a really interesting point, and I'm glad that you brought this up. Can I say A? So I'm going to read this for those of you who might be watching this later. It is so frustrating when I'm trying different ways and I struggle to know what way's right. And I understand it's what works for each individual, but I feel like I want to believe in what people say. I want to trust what people say. You're not alone. I can guarantee that you're not alone in that. And it is difficult when you're hearing so many people talk about any number of things related to healing or mental health or abuse or whatever it is. And sometimes you'll actually hear contradictory things. And you do need to take ultimately what feels right for you. And the first thing that I want to say is I don't think that I'm necessarily like really contradicting specifically this other idea that if you just repeat it to yourself enough, you'll believe it. I mean, I'm kind of contradicting it a little bit, I suppose, but it's more a caveat. It's more something that I think that maybe a lot of people who talk about affirmations don't really understand the complexity or the nuances of how core beliefs based in abuse in particular, or a lot of childhood dysfunction or unhealthiness, the impact that that has. And that's true. There's even a lot of therapists who don't really understand what it means to be a survivor of abuse, for example, or what it means to have a terminal illness as a child, or whatever it might be. Because not all trauma is created equal. So it's not that I think other people are deliberately misleading people, or that they don't know what they're talking about, or anything like that. I think it's just that they're not talking about it in all the ways, from a place of understanding the complexity of the power of our core beliefs in our lives, and understanding maybe those core beliefs. So maybe think of what I'm saying as not don't do that, do this, but as another layer of how to use affirmations in a way that's going to be more helpful. So I'm not suggesting don't write it out. Go ahead and write it out if that feels helpful. If that feels good to you and that feels helpful, keep doing that. Maybe just consider adding that other piece. And it is true that the more that we can find that proof of why we're deserving, or why we're worthy, or why we're capable, or smart, or whatever it is, and we can point to actual things in our lives, even if we don't fully believe it, when we're looking at things that are true, that align with what that affirmation is, then it comes together and we believe it. So I think what I'm saying, and the idea of affirmations in general, can be used together. I will also fully acknowledge, and again, this is my perspective. That's it, just my perspective. I believe that there are a lot of very, very, very well-meaning people who have used this or that kind of tool to feel better, whatever that might be. And probably it's worked for them, which is why they're talking about it. And will educate people on that tool or technique, which is kind of what I do. I've taken my own experience, I've taken my years of practice and expertise, and I teach you what I believe to be true and effective. But the reality is that there are a lot of people who are teaching things that don't understand the complexity of different kinds of issues. Addiction to substances, or any kind of addiction really, is another example. Like, if you're talking to somebody who's an addict about affirmations, like on a kind of big level, just kind of general affirmations without getting into all the caveats, it's going to be the same thing for them. If you are not aware of what it means to be an addict and how that affects you at different levels and all the nuances that that creates, you're going to be leaving out a lot of things. And so when I talk about things no matter what it is, from the perspective of being a survivor and all the complexity and nuance associated with that. But ultimately, we have to do what feels right for us, not what we feel should feel right to us, not necessarily what we feel other people say should work for us. Intuitively, we know. We may fight it. We may say to ourselves it should or it shouldn't. You might judge yourself, but intuitively, you know. And part of healing is learning to trust that. Generally speaking, there is no one way to do anything, really, in life. That's certainly true for healing. So when I talk about something, I talk about it from the place of what I know to be true for me, in my experience, both personally and professionally. But that's my experience. There are other people who would say something very different. But ultimately, we have to trust ourselves. And that can be really hard to do. Didn't know that there was more work than just saying the affirmation. Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that's kind of the reality. That is really what's taught. And I've seen a lot of very well-known people, people that have written books and all kinds of things, talk about affirmations in that way. But I've also known so many people who it just hasn't necessarily been very helpful. And it really is that piece that not only does it not necessarily seem to really take hold, but you can end up feeling worse. Why isn't this working for me? It's supposed to work. It's supposed to be this miracle cure. It's supposed to change everything. It works for everybody else. Why isn't it working for me? Well, that's probably why. So, thank you all for joining me. I've really enjoyed connecting with you. I've enjoyed sharing this information with you, reading your comments, and connecting with you. This was kind of a little bit of not really a trial, because it's going to look a little bit different, but this is kind of what I'm wanting to do in the courageous conversations that I'm going to be having. So if you haven't checked that out, I created a post about courageous conversations on this page. And what I'm wanting to do is just kind of on occasion, maybe, at least right now, bring maybe a few-ish people together, regardless of history, to come together on video, on Zoom, to have a conversation about topics. And I'll be there. I'll answer questions and stuff like that when it's helpful. But it's really to create conversation around all different kinds of things, with healing, with abuse, but also just talking about things that people don't often talk about, and inviting you guys to be a part of that with me. So, like I said, it will be like maybe a few people at a time. I'm hoping to launch that sometime in the next maybe month or so. And then that conversation will be shared on social media and my YouTube channel to help other people gain awareness and understanding, and also to know that they're not alone. So, oh, thank you. Even when you're not ready to say it, the fact that you're listening, the fact that you're open to hearing and being a part of it. And you are saying some things, actually. That's a big part of the first process, first steps in getting to where you want to be, is just being open to hearing it and having conversations around it. The openness is such an important first part. So thank you, everybody. If you've got any other questions, if you watch this on replay, I will come back and try to answer any questions that end up in this video. Tag me. If you write a comment or a question after this video is over, if you tag me, it'll be easier for me to see, because sometimes I'm not able to see all the comments and stuff that people were sharing during the live. So if you tag me in it, I should be able to see it, and then I can come back and respond to your question. So thank you all for joining me. I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Bye.